Welcome to JS on Politics. I'm your host, Greg Borowski, and with the election approaching, we've got a very full slate of topics on today's show. Hillary Clinton is back on the campaign trail, and Donald Trump is making some headway. That John Doe guy is back. What do the new documents tell us about Scott Walker and the world of campaigns today? The governor has revealed his transportation funding plan featuring 2 more years until the zoo interchange is done. We catch up with Common Council President Ashanti Hamilton. We catch you up on the Ron Johnson-Russ Feingold battle. And of course, we give you some winners and losers and take a few questions, all in 30 minutes or less. So let's get started, and we'll start where we frequently do on the show with the presidential race in this tape segment, looking at how things are shaping up at the top of the ticket. We're joined now by Craig Gilbert, our Washington bureau chief, to talk about the state of the presidential race as we get ever closer to November. So, Craig, it has not been a great week for Hillary Clinton with the issues surrounding pneumonia, the stumbles around the 9/11 event, and the fact that no one knew about this until after the fact. How much does the press she's getting on that hurt her, do you think?
Well, it has been a pretty bad week for her. We'll know in the next couple of weeks how bad in terms of its impact on the campaign. I mean, it does revive some very familiar liabilities of hers, the sort of perceptions of her in terms of transparency, credibility issues. The health question is a new wrinkle in the sense that that's something that is now on the table in a bigger way for voters. I think that is something that she can deal with in the long run by just being out there and behaving and looking normal. Certainly, by the time the first debate comes around later this month, I mean, she needs to, she needs to look and sound healthy and functional in terms of her debate, her first debate, where the stakes are going to be very high to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, talk a little bit, though, about, so from the Hillary Clinton standpoint, they're saying, look, setting aside this issues from this past week, she's released more health information than Donald Trump has, and she's released more tax information, and they're saying, shouldn't the focus be on Donald Trump and what he hasn't said about these things?
Yeah, and I think there is, some of the focus has shifted to him, and I think there is some political pressure on him, and I think they felt it to produce more information. I mean, the fact is that, they do share something in common, which is that they're very old for, historically speaking, to be major party presidential nominees. And so, in that sense, it's potentially an issue for both of them.
All right. And in the past week or so, it seems like Donald Trump has been doing a little better on the campaign trail in terms of, better polling numbers in Ohio. Doesn't seem to have had the major gaffe in the past few days that's dogged him. Is he doing anything different, or what's going on from his side of things? Well,
I mean, it's not a high bar to clear to avoid a big gaffe for a week. So that's going to happen. It may not happen. It may not last. But I think they're trying to. They're hoping that he, and a lot of Republicans are hoping that he is a more disciplined candidate, quote unquote, from here on out. The race has narrowed in the polling. I mean, the big unanswered question and the trend in the polling is that, over time, if you step back and look at it, I mean, this race has ranged from a very, very close and almost even race to a 5 or 6 point Clinton lead over Trump, and everything in between. And we don't know. We know what Hillary Clinton's ceiling is. We know that she can carve out a lead of 5 or 6 points. We don't know what Donald Trump's ceiling is. So we don't know if his best number is going to be, head-to-head, even Steven with Clinton, or if he's capable of running ahead of Clinton, not just in an isolated poll here and there, but in multiple polls. And just like if you look at it on a state-by-state basis, the only 2 states where Donald Trump has showed up in the lead on more than just 1 or 2 occasions are Ohio and Florida, the only 2 battleground states where we've had a lot of polling. In all the other states, Hillary Clinton has been ahead in virtually all the polling. So that has to change for Donald Trump, too. I mean, he's doing better. There are more polls coming out now showing him ahead in Ohio. But until there is polling showing him more than occasionally in the lead in some of these other battleground states besides Ohio and Florida, he'll be disadvantaged in this race.
All right, and let's take a look at a story you're working on that's going to run over the weekend about undecided voters here and I presume elsewhere too. But how do they compare to 2012, and what are you finding so far?
Yeah, so we're sort of taking a deep dive into the undecided vote in the Wisconsin polling. Obviously, it's a phenomenon nationally. I mean, it's really striking how much bigger that share of voters who are undecided is compared to 4 years ago. In Wisconsin, it was about 6 or 7%. And now it's almost 20%. So it's almost 3 times bigger. And the single biggest driver of that, of course, is the fact that the number of voters who dislike both candidates is far, far larger than it was 4 years ago. I mean, it's gone from being about 5% of registered voters to about 25% of registered voters. So that is a massive difference. It creates a lot of uncertainty in the campaign because not all these people are voters, are going to vote, but some of them are, and to the extent that they play a role in how they swing, it's a tough sell for both candidates because these are, by definition, voters who aren't happy with their choices. They've had a very hard time making up their minds, and so it's hard to predict what they're going to do on Election Day.
Right. I mean, sometimes voters are undecided because they simply don't know enough about the candidates. This time it seems like they know a lot and they can't genuinely decide. So thanks for joining us today, Craig, and we'll have more from you next week as the campaign moves along.
See you then.
We're joined now by Dan Bice, our Watchdog columnist. Let's pick up on that point where I ended the interview with Craig Gilbert. So it's not like people don't know about Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, right? So why are they all so undecided at this point?
I don't think it's, I mean, we've seen repeatedly that these are 2 unpopular candidates. So I think the issue is not whether you need to know more about the 2 candidates. It's who can I live with? Is it going to be Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton? I think that's the issue. Plus, there is there's new stuff coming out. Obviously, this health issue with Hillary Clinton is new. So I think, there's a poll that's out this morning on Ohio that shows that the undecideds are tipping very strongly in favor of Trump in that state right now. 43% for Trump and only 16% for Clinton. But I think that's in light of what's been going on this week.
All right, well, let's shift topics now. We're going to bring in Patrick Marley from our Madison Bureau to talk about what some of the headline news from yesterday and today, the leaks and the John Doe investigation.
The John Doe that will never go away.
John Doe is back. So, Patrick, give us a quick rundown on what's significant about the leak, what was in there that maybe we didn't know before, and we'll start our conversation there.
Sure. So more than 1,300 more documents were released by the Guardian U.S. got these. And they are some things that we've seen before, but I guess the most significant thing we've seen that is new is $750,000 in donations to the Wisconsin Club for Growth from the head of a company that was being sued for manufacturing lead paint by victims, people who were harmed by lead paint. And just before, in the time before and after these donations, Walker and the Republicans in the legislature had changed the law to help the industry and make it harder to sue them.
All right, and Dan,
I think there were 2 things that I took away from that. One is a pattern, that this seems to be very similar and mirrors 2 other instances that we already knew about. One in which Gogebic Taconite, the mining company, gave money secretly to Wisconsin Club for Growth, and then the legislature and the governor then approved legislation helping them out. And then Menards, the company, John Menard gave $1.5 million secretly to Wisconsin Club for Growth, and the state then gave $1.8 million in tax credits. So the first thing to take away is it looks like there's a pattern where groups that gave to Wisconsin Club for Growth during this recall election did end up getting some things that they wanted from the legislature. And then second one is the timing issue. Why is this all coming out now? Well, in a couple weeks, the U.S. Supreme Court will be taking up the issue, the petition by the prosecutors to try to have this case revived. And there's a lot in this that hasn't been out before. And in particular, there's one email exchange between Scott Walker and Karl Rove, the campaign advisor for George W. Bush, in which Walker's telling Rove, please help out Wisconsin Club for Growth, and he says Wisconsin Club for Growth was responsible for getting Justice Gableman and Justice Prosser elected to the court. And that's one of the main arguments by the prosecutors. They've been saying that those two justices should have recused themselves because they were helped out by one of the litigants in this case.
Right. So, Patrick, let me get your take on that and this issue before this U.S. Supreme Court. Do you expect that they will intervene here and let this case be revived, or is this just one final step here before this issue is closed, at least from a legal perspective?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to know what the U.S. Supreme Court's going to do. They're going to conference on this soon, which means they meet in closed session and talk about this case. They're going to be talking about other cases as well. The U.S. Supreme Court takes only a tiny percentage of the cases presented to it. So just given the odds, they're not great for John Chisholm. But these are big issues. Campaign finance has been something the court's been interested in. This whole issue of whether judges and justices, when they can sit on cases involving their political benefactors, has been of great interest to the U.S. Supreme Court. So I think there's a chance at it, but I don't know that he's got more than a 50% chance.
All right, so let me ask you then, assuming if the Supreme Court doesn't let this go forward, and we've heard all these drips and drabs and in filings and things, will we ever get a full picture of what John Chisholm was looking at and what actually,
we have a pretty good sense of what they were looking at. Obviously, they were looking at coordination between the Walker campaign and conservative groups, most notably Wisconsin Club for Growth. And Wisconsin Club for Growth because a key figure, R.J. Johnson, was both a campaign advisor for the Walker campaign and for Wisconsin Club for Growth. So we know what they were looking at, but the details is what's coming out now. And I don't know if we'll ever get the full picture because the prosecutors are not supposed to release this information, and this has to come out through leaks. And unfortunately, if we get a full picture, it'll have to be through a back door, not through some public disclosure if the Supreme Court doesn't take the case.
All right, let's shift topics now to another big headline story from yesterday and this morning, still ongoing with the discussion on the transportation picture and roads. So, Patrick, I want to ask you to maybe get us started here on what Scott Walker laid out yesterday. There's no new taxes, delays on roads, more money for locals. But what's your sense of this package and its prospects as it goes forward?
Well, this is clearly the biggest fight that we're going to have in the next state budget next year. As some Republican lawmakers have increasingly talked about the need to raise the gas tax or find some other way to get more money for roads, Scott Walker has doubled down on no tax increase unless we make a cut somewhere else with other taxes that's the equivalent amount, which doesn't look very likely at this time. He's saying absolutely no. Yesterday, his administration released its plan, which shows a lot of road delays, prioritizing a couple projects like I-3990 between Madison and the Illinois state line. But the Zoo interchange would be delayed. The north-south leg of I-94 south of Milwaukee would be delayed for a very long time. No work on that for the next 2 years. That's already frustrating Racine area lawmakers who are Republicans. They're going to be fighting this. It's going to be a huge battle.
Yeah. So, Patrick, just broadly, think about roads projects that are, going to be delayed, and where the extra money now is going to go. Who are the winners and losers here? Are there parts of the state that are going to benefit? Certainly, having the Zoo interchange go on longer and the Racine corridor, it doesn't seem like a boon for Southeast Wisconsin in the package.
Yeah, I would say Southeast Wisconsin would be the big loser that we see so far in this battle. If Walker's plan is the one to prevail. Now, people in the rest of the state would say Southeast Wisconsin has sort of gotten its own for the last decade or more because the Marquette interchange got built, the Zoo interchange got built. There are a lot of needs all over the state, but particularly in Southeast Wisconsin because of the infrastructure that's there and the level of traffic it has. Other losers, clearly the road builders are a loser here. The governor wants to bond only $500 million, which is much less than he's ever bonded in the past. So their work would slow down considerably.
We shouldn't accept and think that Scott Walker's plan is the accepted plan yet, because in the next 54 days, we're going to have the road builders, which Patrick just mentioned, and another group, the operating engineers, both of whom will strongly oppose his plan, spending a lot of money on elections to try to make sure that their people get enough votes in the Senate to support a plan that would increase the amount of spending for construction on roads.
And what about in the legislature, Dan or Patrick? So, Robin Voss, he's advocates more spending, right? And his district, that goes right through his district, the Racine.
So that's why the focus is on the Senate,
yeah.
because the Senate has been has been more reluctant to provide extra funding for roads. So the road builders and operating engineers are focusing on particular races that they hope to, and they've already been involved in one race in Oshkosh where there were 2 Republicans running, and they supported the candidate who was supportive of increasing gas tax, and he ended up winning in that race.
Yeah, and Patrick, just on this point, too, long term, if you delay the zoo, doesn't that just increase the costs on the zoo and so forth? I mean, what's the financial calculus behind this where this makes the best sense to go forward this way?
So what the governor says is we got to take care of what we got. We can't be launching all these new projects. But yes, the reality is that, eventually the zoo needs to get done. Eventually I-94 north-south needs to get done. The longer you wait to do that, the more it costs, because you have to do short-term fixes while you're waiting to do the real project, and you just have inflation, which in the construction industry is much higher than the typical inflation you have for consumer goods. So long-term, the state's in a difficult spot if it doesn't find more money, because these costs are going to continue to increase. So it's a trade-off. Do we raise revenue for roads, or do we just live with roads in worse condition? And that's what the lawmakers are battling. I would say I agree with Dan that this plan Walker's touting is not a foregone conclusion by any means. At the same time, those who want to raise money, it's very difficult to see how they can get that through. Even if they were to flip the Senate, which does not look likely in my view, they've still got the governor there, and he would presumably veto anything. So to get through a gas tax increase seems incredibly difficult in any scenario. That doesn't mean they won't find some money in some other way.
So what is the calculation? The calculation is Scott Walker rose to significance in the legislature in 1995 by opposing a 3-cent a gallon gas tax increase that Tommy Thompson proposed. He became a name at that point, and talk radio loved him, and he's not about to change his message now that he's in the governor's mansion.
All right, we're going to shift now to some local issues, and this taped interview that our columnist James Causey did with Common Council President Ashanti Hamilton on the crime plan in Milwaukee. This is one of the first times we really heard from the Common Council President on this.
Let's first of all talk about your public safety plan.
Okay.
It's drawn some criticism from the county executive and the public and some other Democratic leaders in the city. First of all, will you be revising the plan?
Well, the set of recommendations are intended to be, debated and revised. I mean, that's the whole purpose of having this process. So the point is to have something to at least have a discussion and conversation about. I think once as we kind of move forward, put some more ideas and information, a data-based kind of approach to the direction that we need to go in. I think most folks will be very satisfied with having something on the table, and at least a city council that is willing to force the conversation.
Do you buy the comments from some people who indicate that this is another way to get more African American males incarcerated?
Yeah, well, I think if most folks who kind of make that plea would have to just take a look at the body of work that's come through the council in the past 10 years. I think we've been very forward-thinking in our approach to public safety. If you take a look at the last few budgets, we have grown the resources that are spent toward diversion, prevention, and intervention, and in many ways brought the city into participation into those strategies where they didn't exist before. And so I think there would have to be an understanding of that before people would make that judgment call.
Last question. The county executive called the plan asinine, and Alderman Donovan immediately attacked back. What do you think about another public official calling another plan asinine? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, it was my communication with the county executive is that that's not what he intended, but that's the kind of conversation, though, in exchange that we're trying to get away from. Once people retreat to their corners and start having a public conversation about policy issues that really deserve our approach to this to be data-driven, our approach should be, solution-focused. One of the reasons why I wanted to have this as a public discussion is because, hopefully people wouldn't revert to this, kind of petty language to talk about this very heavy, these very heavy issues that have such an incredible impact on the way communities operate. And so this impact is just going to have to be, we have to have a higher level of language when we're using, when we're having a discussion about these heavy topics. And so, hopefully we'll be at a place where people can disagree. We can use data to inform our actions, and we can do the things that's going to create safer communities and at the same time create opportunities for people who live in those communities.
So that was an interview that James Causey did with Ashanti Hamilton. And Dan, before we move on, let me ask you, so just the other day, Alderman Bob Donovan, the chairman of the Public Safety Committee, said, hey, this plan, which his committee put together, now he wants to have hearings in each of the police districts. The city budget is coming out any day now, any week. What are the odds that this actually some of this gets put into the budget in the near future?
Somewhere between slim and none. Either it's going to become a plan that's meaningless, which everybody can agree to, or it's going to be a plan that Bob Donovan feels strongly about and much of the rest of the council opposes, or something that the North Side council members support and Donovan and the South Side council members oppose.
All right, well, let's turn now. We're joined by Bill Glauber, who's covering the U.S. Senate race for us. And Bill, you're going to get a law degree before this is over, I presume, because we've got all these complaints back and forth.
Bringing out the lawyers. The campaign's really going well when both sides are bringing out the lawyers.
Let's start with the Johnson complaint versus Feingold, or the GOP versus Feingold.
GOP versus Feingold is they're claiming that he did politicking while a federal worker when he was an envoy to Africa. They're also claiming that the Progressives United Political Action Committee and nonprofit, they're calling it a slush fund. Feingold says no wrongdoing. He didn't do politicking while on UN time.
All right.
Well, on State Department time.
All right, and then give us the quick view of Feingold and the Democrats versus Johnson. This is a familiar issue to folks, especially Dan at the table.
Both of them are. Dan created both issues.
Dan, we have you to blame for this.
The deferred compensation Johnson received at the time he left Packer, which was the manufacturing firm he helped create. It was a $10 million deal that he got, and it coincidentally, say the Democrats, he spent $9 million on the 2010 race. So they're saying that this is an illegal contribution to his 2010 race. So they have filed charges with the Senate Ethics Committee. Let's be honest, neither charge is going anywhere at this stage. This is what they do at these late stages in campaigns. It does muddy the waters, and they're both trying to raise the negatives of the other.
And don't be surprised if the fact that they filed a complaint becomes something that's included in ads in the next month or month.
Right. You'll see this little cycle. The headline about the complaint will become a part of the ad about the complaint. So it goes back.
So
and
you've
forth.
been through this too.
I've been through this many times. Yeah. But for the voters, you mentioned this, Bill. I mean, it's sort of. How do you decipher?
I think
what's
it's
right,
noise.
what's wrong,
I
what's
honestly
important,
think for the voters, it's going to be mostly noise. All they're trying to do is ramp up the negatives of the other. It seems to be a close race. I got to believe the race is going to be determined on something other than these two charges that take more than a sentence to explain. Once you get beyond a sentence to explain a controversy, then you're in the weeds.
I think they'll try to simplify both issues and try to make them fit a larger narrative, which is the Progressives United argument that they're going to try to make is that Russ Feingold says he's for all of these ideals, yet he's a hypocrite. When it came to him, he ended up violating a number of his promises, and he ran.
You lost me on the third sentence.
Sorry.
Yeah. Okay, get the next one in one sentence.
The next one. The next one's not as complicated. That Ron Johnson used corporate money to reimburse himself for the money he spent on the first race.
All right. Well, let's turn to our winners and losers and keep those maybe to a couple sentences. We'll see if before we lose Bill over here. You're trying to
The Guardian.
Wait, hold on. I'm going to go
I'm
first.
Oh,
Yeah.
you're
I'm
first.
Okay.
Okay.
I just want to see if Dan loses you after a couple sentences.
Okay.
That's where measuring sticks.
No, my
So-
winner. I want to salute the legacy of Eric Vaughn, the talk show host here in Milwaukee. Since our last show, he passed away, and it's not just that it's another talk show host passing away or another figure dying. I think his show is an important forum, particularly for African Americans, to discuss sometimes volatile issues. And on his show, and he was a very calm, reasonable, intelligent man who allowed these issues to be discussed in those manners.
Yeah, many people woke up each morning, and Eric Vaughn was there, the person they heard in the morning, and
you know, the issues he dealt with are some of the most volatile we have. Yet I was on a show numerous times. You know, he's just pretty much. I mean, everything was very smooth and calm, and everybody else is you know, most of the other talk radio shows are white hot. His was not that way. It's very cool.
All right, Bill, let's get your winner.
Well, the Guardian, to me, a big get on the John Doe documents, and you know, you have to salute them. Whatever you think about whether they should have been leaked or not leaked, they got the documents. They did a very good, comprehensive job on presenting that.
All right.
And hats off to somebody like
All right,
that.
and your loser of the week.
Well, I think Wisconsinites, they still are kept in the dark about what the John Doe was, what all the documents are in, what the allegations are, and I think that they deserve a clear accounting of what occurred.
We should be clear, the Journal-Sentinel has been fighting for a long time to have everything released at once, because most of these releases that we've had so far, most of the leaks that we've had so far, benefit one side or the other. Yesterday's leak benefited the prosecutors. Earlier leaks to the Wall Street Journal benefited the targets of the John Doe. It would be nice to see everything to make a decision for ourselves who has the better case.
All right, and Dan, let's get your loser from this past week.
My loser's a story that Patrick did today on J.B. Van Hollen, and how when he was leaving office as the state's top cop as Attorney General, he went to one of his former staffers who then was running Department of Corrections and asked him to make sure that he got J.B.'s wife a job so that they would have insurance once he left office.
All right, let's go to our viewer questions now, and I'm going to start with you, Dan. I'm going to pair up two that's come at it, same issue from different angles. There's one from Darian who says, why ain't the John Doe investigation finding anything about Walker? And Jane Doe, who says, is this the John Doe revelation that finally does in Scott Walker? So what, for the average person in your views on Scott Walker, where does this leave you, all this information?
I'm guessing the people who like Scott Walker are very much like Darian, and they think that this has found nothing on him. And the other people are like, you know, when is this finally going to bring him down? You know, he was able to get reelected after one of these major disclosures. In 2014, he won, despite the fact that we all knew that Gogebic Taconite had given $700,000 to Wisconsin Club for Growth, and the governor then turned around and eased mining regulations as a result, or shortly after that. And now the figure comes out to be $1.2 million. So I think people are so polarized on Scott Walker right now. I think any news, including the John Doe news, pretty much plays into the narrative that you already have about him.
All right, and Bill, let me ask this question of you. This will be our last one. This is from GOP Gary, who says, will voters wise up to the idea that Russ Feingold is a phony when it comes to his Mr. Clean image? And this goes to what Dan was talking about before on this narrative of that, you know, he ran on, you know, campaign finance, and now there's all these other issues out there.
You know, I'm not going to, you know, I certainly wouldn't call him a phony and or anything else pejorative like that. But what is interesting is that he still remains above water in terms of, you know, people like him more than they don't like him. And that's pretty astounding for this late in a campaign. I thought that both candidates would be upside down.
You in fact have said that on the show that they would.
And
you've still got time.
Still have time, but Feingold is still right side up. So whatever he's doing on the campaign trail, at least for him, seems to be working.
All right, so that's where we'll end our discussion for today. Thanks for joining us at jsonline.com and on Facebook Live, and we'll be back next week Thursday at the same time.